Hey, everybody. Thanks for tuning in. Welcome to another episode of Maybe I'm Just Not Getting It. I'm your podcast host, Robert Davis. Appreciate y'all for taking the time. Follow me on social media. Instagram is RTD underscore III. My Facebook, Robert Trey Davis III. The podcast is on. It streams on Apple Podcast, iHeartRadio, Spotify, and YouTube, all under the same name. Maybe I'm just not getting it. Like, comment, subscribe, follow, all that good stuff. As I say before every episode, I appreciate your support, feedback, your participation, everything like that. It really makes doing this a lot easier as we continue to trek through this third season. So, with that being said, I'll kind of get to the show. In today's episode, I want to talk about Drake, the musical artist. And with him, I think he's a just a fascinating figure to speak about because regardless of how anybody feels about him, he is one of the most commercially successful artists of all time and the most commercially successful hip hop artist of all time. That's not really a debatable point. Like, that is kind of a fact. So I think it is interesting. He's a fascinating figure to speak on because of his personality, his brand, his multiple rap beefs, kind of how he goes about his business. And I think it's just a good topic for the podcast to speak about. Drake isn't. He's one of my favorite artists. He isn't my favorite per se, but he is one of my favorite. But especially around this end of year time, every year we see people's Spotify or Apple Music Wrapped, and he's always seems to be on top of everybody's list. So I think with that being said, it's good just to take some time to speak about him, as an artist that had, legitimate points to bring up about, his impact, his place in rap, his practices, all these sort of things. And I just think it's a interesting conversation to have. And so, with that, on top of that, I just think, his personality and his bravado kind of adds to this uniqueness of his brand, one that you wouldn't generally see because or I wouldn't say generally see, it would be atypical of kind of a rap star. You know, and the and I think that brand, that personality, kind of like the the guy not from this scene but now on the scene type of brand that he has, the kind of like soft, sensitive, kind of like the witty, petty, Casanova-ish type of guy. Is again, it's generally not something that you would think of when you would think of like top rap star, right? But it works for him, and it adds to the uniqueness of his brand in the era where I talked about in another episode this season of a lack of individualism and a lack of creative thinking in all elements of life. He is generally, he can be seen as one of the more individual or true to his own essence, his own brand type of people that you would see out there. And I think that in that reliance on his own uniqueness is one of the things that kind of drives people to supporting him or drives him to being as popular as he is. And I don't think that rap or R&B or has I don't think they. I'm not gonna say I don't think they see it, but you rarely see somebody who blends so many different styles and subgenres within those styles together. So you can talk about rap, R&B, pop, and how he kind of blends those together. You can talk about within rap, the different kind of geographical styles that he seems to go after. Like New Orleans, Atlanta, Memphis, Houston, New York, like these different because all these areas have different styles of music. Reggae, he does a lot, like, and they have different elements to it that makes them popular, that makes them unique, and he plays on that a lot down to his the lyrics down to the accent down to the slang that he uses on these songs, to the samples that he uses, and I think it's something that we just haven't seen anybody do before, at least not to this level or not to this level of effectiveness. And I think all these things make him an interesting figure to talk about because there are so many different sides and styles of him. While and I think that's interesting because it all still I think genuinely reflects who he is and is genuinely under that same person. But I think Drake, depending on who he's with or where he's at, it depends. I don't want to say depends on the type of Drake that you get, but it depends on. I mean, I think it largely impacts the type of person that he is, and I think that's naturally who he is. And I think that's weird to say and weird to see, but I think that is, and I think that's one of the reasons why I chose to talk about him on this episode. Um, and there's a lot of questions, I think, and legitimate ones at that, as to is his presence in rap authentic? Is his presence in rap positive? Or does he even need to be a positive or authentic presence when those same questions or those same criticisms can be drawn on so many different other artists? So I think all of these are legitimately things to ask, legitimately things to want to bring up, and I think just kind of like I said, the topic of today's episode. And so why this particularly matters, I mean, as I was saying before, I don't think hip hop has ever seen a figure like him, um, that kind of toes that line between pop star, R&B star, rap star. Um, and like I was saying, like I think it is a testament to his adaptability, and also a testament to his ability to kind of be creative in his own right, to kind of blend those lines, as seamlessly as he does. And we've seen a lot of artists blend the line between rap and R&B. We've seen artists blend the line between, R&B and pop. We've seen some artists even try to blend the line between rap and pop, but never like all three at the same time, individually and at the same time as he does. And I think it's quite diverse and quite interesting to see from the same person, especially when again their background is so uniquely outside of hip hop. And I mean, it's interesting to me. Um, and I mean, I think the thing about Drake is that I think his brand and his music, not just his brand, it attracts fans of all demographics, which also I think is unique to him, not unique to himself, but it's a testament to why he is as successful as he is. I mean, we're talking about again, different races and nationalities, black, white, Hispanic. I know in Toronto there's a large East Indian population. There's a large African immigrant population, which have both. He has a lot of fans in. Um, in America, like I said, it's black, white, Hispanic, Asian, all across the board. Like, and I think just that race nationality part is not, like other artists are able to expand across those borders too. So it's not like, oh, this is something only Drake does. But I think it is a testament to why why his fanhood is as large as it is. Gender, both men and women generally. I know Drake says he makes music for women, but men generally, if women are vibing to music, generally men will if it's something that they can relate to or somewhat like, they'll come into that same area. And so that age. My dad isn't a Drake fan, but he's 81. He knows what Hotline Bling is. Like his music is relatable to all ages, or at least catchy enough that all ages can kind of pick it up. Some particular songs, some not. Um, but again, that's a testament to being able to make things that people across different areas, different brands, different ages, different walks of life can really bring themselves into. And I think it's just a strong testament to who you are as an artist to be able to kind of toe those lines, and personality. Like, I mean, I think Drake has fans like of your preppy people, your thugs, your hip hop fans, your pop fans, all across the personality spectrum and scheme. He also is able to kind of draw fanhood from, which again is interesting given who he is and his personality, being kind of like the preppy, corny, cringy even at times kind of guy. Not from this like always kind of like the outsider looking in, not from the rap scene, but I'm on the rap scene type of thing. And I think it's just it is rare for somebody to be able to what's the word I'm looking for? It's rare for somebody to be able to appeal to so many different pockets while still seeming to be within themselves. Um, and I think it's not something I think every artist could do. Um, and his success, and another reason I think it's important to talk about Drake is that his success in general transcends what most artists in across history has been able to do. We're talking about, as he brags about all the time, somebody with more number one singles than Michael Jackson, who I believe held the record. Like, that is extremely impressive, regardless of the genre, regardless of the time era, regardless of anything. Like that is beyond crazy to do. And then you look at that, and then you also say, okay, you have somebody that is on Billboard's top 100 artists of all time. He's in the top 25. He's number 16 of all time. Not only is he number 16 of all time, he's the highest rated rap artist that they have, and damn near like the second or third highest R&B artist. Like, so you look at that and you say to yourself, like, this is somebody that is extremely accomplished and successful within the music field, and I don't think that can be overlooked. I think sometimes we have a tendency to try to overlook success, um, in a way that it tries to be like, oh, just because you did that doesn't mean that you're good at it. But I don't think that you could do all of that and not be good at it. You know what I mean? Um, and I think since the beef with Kendrick Lamar, he's become an even more polarizing figure. And his fanhood, I don't, and it's died down. Like, the whole divisiveness and the fanhood, I think, has died down now because I think just so much time has passed since that era. And part of the reason I wanted to give it some time, because I felt like to talk about this, you needed to see it in like a complete sense. So much time. I mean, it's like about a year and a half since the whole beef had died down, and you see it as a fact of kind of how he's able to stay relevant without. I mean, I don't think beyond. I think that the album with Party Next Door, like, he hasn't dropped the album. He hasn't. You know, I think his tour was still going on at the time of the beef. He hasn't been on a different tour or anything like that. And so, for his success, his commercial success, to still be nominated for Grammys for this upcoming year, to still be the top streamed artist for this year, to still be somebody that's still people on the internet talking, still making trends about Drake's music, asking when his album is coming out and everything. For all this to still be the same as it was beforehand, I think that's also a large testament to who he is as an artist, and not only that, but just his place in rap is a mainstay that I don't think, or his place in music even is a mainstay that I don't think will change. And I think that is solely because of the fact of just how successful he has been. Um, and so you look at that, and like I said, it's either a lot of times back in that era of time, it was a love him or hate him type of mix. I don't think it's as divisive as that now, but it's always people that generally, that it's always going to be people that feel strongly against them and feel strongly for him. And I think even invoking that reaction out of people is something, um, that is a testament to just how captivating of an artist that he is, I should say. Um, and to speak a little bit more about that beef, I think it was a concerted effort, and I don't think it was a concerted effort on Kendrick Lamar's part, quite frankly, but it was a concerted effort, I think, on a lot of the artists that surrounded that, and a lot of just kind of like the pop culture or the internet way of trying to cancel or end Drake, and I just don't. I don't say this often because I don't generally believe in the concept of being too big to fail, but I do think in the sense of music, he is too big to fail. In the music and entertainment industry, I think Drake is too big to fail. I think his reach and his brand is so seeping into so many different areas and it's so synonymous with so many different sounds that he couldn't that I just don't see that happening. Not to say that it couldn't, I just personally don't see it happening. And I mean I think that I think that concerted effort was kind of lame to try to kill or cancel somebody, but at the same time I understand the concept of, oh, he lost the beef, so it's like, oh yeah, Drake's career is dead. But I mean, I think that's another reason why I wanted to kind of give this time after that to speak about it, to say kind of like I don't think that regardless, and just to be clear, I do agree with most of what Kendrick Lamar said about Drake. Drake's not my favorite artist, but I'm a big fan of him. But I do agree with a lot of what Kendrick Lamar's criticism of Drake is. Or if I don't agree with it, I can understand where he's coming from with it. But I don't think it really matters, because if we're talking about music, it's at the end of the day going to be, can you relate to the people and can you sell? I mean, it's a competition in that regard, and nobody beats him in that. And I think that's one thing that irritates people, is that he consistently disses people, beats with people, and it does not impact his ability to be successful. Where oftentimes we would see people, take the wrong shot at somebody or something like that, where it seems like even if he does, it does not have a long term impact on him. And I mean, I think there's fair questions to ask, or there's fair question to consider when we talk about Drake, right? Like, I think, there's a fair question on, is he a culture vulture? I don't believe so, because I think I don't believe the concept of culture vulture in rap. I really don't. Unless it was like that. Was it Macklemore and Ryan Lewis? I don't even think they were a culture vulture just because they won that Grammy for hip hop. I mean, I think, if you're making music, you can't be told what music you can and can't make. And if something influences you and you make it, then that's your music. I also think that, Drake being, half black from Toronto, a town where at that time when he was coming up wasn't like a hip hop epicenter or a black culture epicenter. I think it can be seen as somebody, again, that is an outsider to what you would perceive to be the norm. But I don't think that makes him a culture vulture per se. I do understand the criticism that come with it. I do understand people's thoughts about that. But personally, I don't. I mean, I don't think that's the case, because, I mean, I think any and everybody can. People move out to LA to pursue music, or New York to pursue, their dreams or stuff all the time. But they make them a culture vulture to that particular area because they're not, because they might have been from like Midwest of Nebraska and they chose to make themselves somebody new when they moved out somewhere else. I'm not sure. And the other reason I say that is because I don't think Drake made himself anything different. I think he just perfected being who he was, and perfected being able to kind of navigate the different pockets of hip hop, or the pockets of the entertainment industry. And I think his influence is not. I think his influence is as natural as any other mainstream huge artist's influence. I don't think it. I mean, like, and so in saying that, I think to a degree all of them are a bit inflated and a bit manufactured, because like these, the labels and these radio stations or the music stations and stuff like that, they're going to manufacture, what they feel like is selling, and they feel like Drake is selling. But if he wasn't doing, if he didn't have that, whatever that is that sparks him on his own, then these industries wouldn't be trying to manufacture that. You know what I mean? So I think in that regard, is his influence a natural one? Yes, in my opinion. Is he a culture vulture? No, I just think he emulates a lot of cultures. He emulates a lot of culture, and I don't think that's being a vulture per se. Is I think it because other artists do the same thing all the time. So I mean, that's if he's a culture vulture, in my opinion, he's no more than what I think other individuals are. And also, I think it's a fair question and probably a better question to ask: is he a positive influence on his audience? I don't believe he is. Now that I don't, but also, again, I don't believe he is to the same degree. I don't believe other artists are either. I don't believe Future is a positive impact on young men that listen to him. Don't believe Drake is a positive impact mostly on the young men that listen to him either. Um, and I think that obviously is a concern. But I don't think that's something I can blame him specifically for because is hip hop ever been that? You know what I mean? Like I think there are artists that are positive influence, but for the most part, hip hop has always promoted people that don't speak positively into it, that promote violence, materialism, misogyny, blah 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 blah. And Drake promotes even more now, violence more now than he ever has, but misogyny and materialism and kind of like a short-sighted type of thought. He promotes that, I believe, just as much as everybody else. But I mean, the question is the question, is this good or is it selling? Because it's selling. I mean, and if it wasn't, it's selling and it's no different. He's not going harder on those things than other people either. So I really think that's kind of like, but I do think it's a fair question to ask, and I don't think he is. But again, I don't think he is more than any other artist is either. Um, and just to speak on some further examples, I think what makes Drake such a fascinating type of case to study is his background as a child actor for the Degrassi show. I think is so interesting because we've seen other artists have backgrounds in other forms of entertainment before they got there. Whether like Tupac being a background dancer, R. Kelly, not R. Kelly, P Diddy, sorry, confusing my pedophiles in that one, right? Oh, he wasn't a pedophile, but P Diddy, with his, obviously working in the assistant and the producer ranks, trying to get his name out there. Um, Childish Gambino, I think, is a good one to bring up here because he was a writer for SNL before he got there. I think Offset was a dancer as well as Tupac. So, like you have these artists that are coming from other that have backgrounds in other elements of the entertainment industry, and I think Childish Gambino is a good example to use, kind of like to compare with Drake here, because like one thing that I think is interesting with Drake is that background as a child actor on a show that was for a primarily white audience in a primarily white area, because that was his place. Like, you know what I'm saying? That was his. That it wasn't like he was there because somebody put him there. He was from Toronto. He was acting in a show in Toronto. Like that was his natural environment, and I think that's so interesting because you wouldn't primarily see that, and you wouldn't primarily see somebody that's coming from one of those primarily white type of environments and factors to be somebody that would be so prevalent in these ultra black, ultra urban, ultra hip hop arenas. Um, but yet he has. I mean, and like the reason I brought up, like I think Childish Gambino is a good um, alternate example to use here. Is that again, Childish Gambino was a writer for Saturday Night Live, a comedy writer. He was a stand-up comedian, and while he was a black man expressing, his thoughts and his opinions from the concept of a black man in America, he had a large white following. I mean, he still does have a large white following, and I think that really, like, as we see Childish Gambino now, or even in his, like, I think he's a little bit beyond his prime now, but I know he's had those health issues and everything. Like, his audience still, while his audience does have a lot of black people in it, it still has that base of kind of like the alternative, the white alternative type of feel to it. Where Drake really has been able to kind of solidify himself as a black artist. Played in extremely black places, played in every strip club in America, played in trap houses, played in every club, played, like these are the sort of of places you wouldn't expect him to be in. And then when you take a look at his personality and his style, kind of being the preppy, almost kind of cringy, what's the word? I don't want to say creepy, awkward, the white kid who hangs with black kids type of thing, being emotional, being kind of petty at times, sensitive. And these are words he used to use for himself. Like, I'm not trying to like make jokes about it, but like, you wouldn't expect that personality style to be so effective in these arenas, and you wouldn't expect his music to draw so what's the word I'm looking for? You wouldn't expect his music to draw so effectively and to be so popular within just completely, utterly black spaces. But they have been. And that's been the primary factor moving of his music. Um, and so, I just think that it is interesting to see somebody that has such a background, that has such this personality that is so atypical of what you would expect from a rap star or an R&B star, or R&B star, but what you more or less would expect from a pop star, really, and to be as prevalent as he is. Um, and I think one of the reasons why that is that musically, I think Drake is very strong. Like within the craft of making music, I think he doesn't have a particular weak spot. Like I think lyrically, he's one of the better lyricists. I'm gonna talk about later about like the ghostwriting and the stealing songs type of stuff. But I think lyrically, he is one of the better lyrical artists that are out. I think he does a good job of making hooks that are catchy. I think he does a good job of making different vibes of songs, different stuff that you can dance to, stuff you can sing to, stuff you can chill to. Like I think he does a good job of that. He does a good job of switching his sound up at times to match different vibes or different energies. And he's obviously a singer and a rapper, so he does a good job mixing that. Um, he has great production over his music. So I think because he is so strong at that, because he can do that so efficiently, it does put him in a position to where he is looked at as and rightfully so, as an extremely talented musical artist. Because if you look at the different concepts that you would generally judge a musician by, especially a rapper, he seems to hit all of those at a high level. Might not be the best. You may think there's somebody better at particular areas or not, but he does hit them all at a pretty high level. And I think that's kind of one of the more interesting things about him. Um, and I think one thing to kind of switch up a tad bit is or to come back to kind of like the cringy side of it is that the clothing choices and the hairstyles and stuff at times can be kind of cringy, but they go back to that's the uniqueness of his own brand, and it tends to sell for people. But it can be kind of cringy at times. It can be the different colored clips in his hair, the bulletproof vest, the wearing your Nike, your Jordan gloves and stuff like that. Like he an athlete, just out in general, all that sort of stuff. I think it can be weird, but it's no weirder than any other celebrities that be dressing weird because they got the money, time, and freedom to do so. So I can't criticize him for things that I think other people openly do as well. Well, I can't criticize him more than I criticize other people for things that they do as well. I can say it looks weird to me, but like that's his right to look weird. Um, but it is something, and again, I think it just adds to that uniqueness of his brand that makes people kind of interested in him in a sense. And so like the thing that I wanted to ask, I mean, not thing I wanted to ask, but like the concept is like, is he tapping into musical styles or is he being a copycat? Because Drake taps into a lot of different musical styles. Let's just stick within rap. You have reggae, you have, well, reggae isn't rap, but let's bring that particular sense of rap and rap adjacent. Like the Toronto kind of R&B rapish style, especially when he first kind of came out. The New Orleans bounce type of music that we heard, and stuff like I keep one. I cannot remember the nice for what and that sort of in that era of it, where it was a lot of New Orleans bounce type of music. A lot of his music has been Houston kind of based, or Memphis, that slow, that chop, screw, slurred type of style to it. And also a lot of his success has come, to Kendrick Lamar point, has come from Atlanta and that Atlanta style as well. He's also made like the started from the bottom, like your New York type of style music as well. And I think, is he a copycat, or is he just good at emulating musical styles into his own music? I think it's a bit of both. And I think, to be a good musician, you have to be a bit of both. So I can't really claim that, it's bad or it's good one way or the other. But I think to be a good musician, you do have to be a bit of both, because you do have to be able to emulate other styles, to change your music up, to be able to show that you're not a one trick pony. And at the same time, I do think that that also means you have to do that in a way that is authentic to you and respectful to what you're to the sound that you're taking from, and to the the culture you're taking from. And I think he does that a way that he at least believes is effective, and he believes is respectful. And that's really all that you can ask for, quite honestly. And so I think, the answer to that question, is he a copycat? I mean, no more than I think any other musical artist. Snoop Dogg has copied every musical style that you can, from a gospel to soul to all the, like, is he a copycat, or is he just trying to do new things with his music to, to reach people? And I think that's the same. I think all musicians kind of face that element of criticism. But I think Drake has definitely been the best at emulating other cultures' sounds into his music. And one thing I think he doesn't get a lot of credit for, which also I think is extremely impressive, is that he turned Toronto, which before Drake, I think it was a Cardinal official, was like official, however you say his name, was probably the most famous rapper to come from Toronto. And you probably couldn't think of anybody else, honestly, that came from Toronto. And he turned what was kind of like this, I don't want to say a white town, but he turned this area that was seen as like, oh, Toronto in Canada, and like white place and all this, into an epicenter of black culture. Because now you have multiple artists out from Toronto, whether it was The Weeknd, whether it was Party Next Door, whether it was Tory Lanez. You have, multiple, like his influence with the Toronto Raptors made them popular, where they even won the championship, as he was ambassador there. Um, like it's a place that people go now. It's a place, it has this nickname, the Six, and all this. Like, it's become an epicenter for black culture that was not before. And I know that every artist represents where they're from, and they're going to put their city on the map. But I'm not sure if many could take somewhere that was never even thought about, kind of, a major city. It's like a major international city, but never thought about in that hip hop or black culture type of epicenter, and put that on the map the way that he had. I think that's extremely impressive, and I'm not sure if others could do so. Um, he's also been in multiple. I mean, one thing I want to talk about with Drake is that he's been in multiple beefs and disses, and that's something that you would not expect from somebody with the background, or that presents themselves the way that he does. You wouldn't expect it to be as confrontational. You wouldn't expect it to be as battle rapish as he has been, as diss track maker as he has been, win or lose. Like, you just wouldn't expect it. And I mean, I think that is also part of what draws people to him, is that they sense this, I don't want to say fearlessness, but they sense a confrontationalness in his music that other artists don't get, because he disses more people than most rappers do. And so people like hearing that. They like hearing they like hearing the beef and the drama and the tea and all that. Like, and they go for it. And I just think that's something, whether we talk about Rick Ross, Kendrick, Joe Budden, Meek Mill, Future, Pusha T, you can talk about LeBron, you can talk about DeMar DeRozan, you can talk about Pharrell, you can talk about Swiss Beats, you can, and more and more and more that I'm not even mentioning. Like, and whether it's just a line in ASAP Rocky, whether it's just a line in a song, whether it's a full song about them, whatever the case may be, it's so his willingness to be in those type of arenas, in those mudslinging competitive arenas, makes people like him more. And I think, and bring it back to the Kendrick Drake thing, I think Drake obviously lost that beef and was the butt of that joke. But I think the difference between how his career has went since then and how J. Cole's career has went since then is that I think J. Cole has taken the the impact of being the person that didn't fight. Like, you can respect the person that lost, but you can't respect the person that didn't fight at all, or that backed out of the fight, I should say. And I think that's kind of where we're at with that, in a sense. Like, in a sense, I don't, and that's just a small sense of it, quite frankly. But I think that's where we're at with that. And I mean, I just think it's something that you wouldn't expect from him, and it's something that plays to his advantage. Even when he loses, I think the willingness to be in those and the willingness to stay in it and be like, oh, I don't give a shit that I lost. I'm stage talk. Like, I think that willingness to stay in it makes people be like, oh, I fuck with Drake. Like, whether it's right or wrong. And I think the other thing about Drake is his musical philosophy. I'm taking one that he said a long time ago in like the start of his career, is that he makes music for women and he makes music for you to listen to in your car and ride and listen to in your car at night. And I think the ride and listen to in your car at night is really just making music to vibe to. And I think a lot of artists don't have that level of simplicity in their theology of what they're doing or what they want to do with their music. I mean, because I think his music is a lot more sophisticated in the sense of like the styles that he puts out and the brand and what he does with his music and the samples and the features and all that. But like the just generally what he's trying to do is a lot simpler than what I think a lot of people give him credit for, and that's very interesting to me, quite frankly. That it would, I mean, because I get the concept of making music for women, because women are going to sell like that. Like when I say sell it, like if women are enjoying music and having a good time, mostly men are going to be there in those same arenas, and they're probably going to pick up on that same music as well. As long as it's not like, you know, Taylor Swift or anything, or Beyonce. Well, Beyonce has a lot of male fans, but you know what I mean. Like, I think in those elements, especially as a rap star, if you can appeal to women in a heavy sense, especially as a male, then men are going to listen to you as well, because what are they going to play when women are around? You. So like, and if you can make music to vibe to in different vibing situations, whatever it is, you got something you can just jam and play in your car, and just, or you can listen to at work and just vibe to, or you can listen to like throughout your house or whatever the case may be. You're always gonna get plays and you're always gonna get listens, because that is the aura that you're putting out. And so to kind of switch to like some of my concerns, I guess I know I spoke about some of my concerns already, but to switch to kind of some of my major concerns about Drake, I think his music has a theme of toxic masculinity and misogyny in it, which isn't different from most hip hop artists or artists in general, quite frankly. I think what's a little bit different for him is that it's veiled in this kind of aura of wittiness and this Casanova type of play, type of thing. And I think it has a negative impact a lot of times on his fans, especially his male ones. But that's, it is that's what people, that's what a lot of his fans like. They like that kind of the playerism, the smooth talking type of thing with women, and sometimes when he's on these tracks and he's talking to women almost like children or objects in a sense, or talking above them instead of to them type of thing, or at them instead of to them type of thing. And I think these are all elements that people tend to like I think some people tend to enjoy because it's what has traditionally sold, is what has traditionally been popular. But I don't think it. But the question that I always have is what impact does it have on his fans, especially his young male fans? Because I think women, as far as hip hop goes, are used to listening to music that kind of objectifies or degrades them to the point to where they can kind of, I think, separate it to a degree, you know, 'cause, in the sense of knowing that it degrades them or whatever, but kind of taking that out of it and just enjoying it for like the sake of what it is because it's been pushed to them. I think men are the ones that kind of take that music a little bit more literally in terms of like the message that's being put out. And I think with that is where that negative impact can come from because obviously if you're a young male listening to Drake, you might start talking to women like, you like you're a Casanova, or you talking like you're so much smarter than them, or you got things going on they couldn't imagine, or you just a pawn in my day or some shit like that. And it can be negative. I mean, that obviously can have a negative impact on everything. And I mean, also, I mean, I think, but as well, I think that it's the same thing that other people do. I think the Casanovaism and stuff, even with that, is the same thing that other people do. But it doesn't, I mean, but I can't blame him more than I blame other artists. It doesn't take away the accountability from him in a general sense, but I can't pinpoint him more on that than I pinpoint other artists as well. And the same thing regarding like materialism, right? Like his music does have a materialistic nature to it. Like he glamorizes the same stuff that most rappers, most musicians do. Money, cars, clothes, houses, women, flaunting how much money he has over somebody else, or how somebody can't emulate the things or do replicate the things that he's doing. And I think that's part of that is, again, that's part of hip hop, right? That's part of like the rap diaspora that we have, is that oh yeah, part of it is you got to be able to say who you are compared to someone else. Oh, I'm this, I'm this, I'm this compared to you, and yeah, you get it. But like it he does, and again, I don't think he does it more than anybody else, but he does it a lot. It's a mainstay of his thing. Drake gets on many songs. That's what the internet theme is currently right now. It's like, oh, Drake be yapping on intros about stuff you can't imagine. I'm at the only room in the B-blows and blah 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 blah. Like, and only 1% of his audience can probably imagine that, can probably emulate that. And it's promoting this lifestyle that is unimaginable by most of his fan base. But materialism is a part of hip hop, so I can't blame him for that more than I blame other artists. But again, it doesn't shake his accountability in that, and wanting to see him kind of grow as an artist to come out of that. It's all about kind of the materialism that you have, or steadily promoting that. And I think the other half of that, to what I was just getting to, is that promoting a lifestyle that that like 1% only of your fan base can really relate to. And it's not even just that. It's that it's kind of like an open, ironic joke that he's aware of that you can't relate to it. And I know to a degree for some people it's kind of living vicariously through him. Like you can feel like you're in the Masoni room in the Beatles when you listen to Drake. I mean, maybe you can feel like you're in a $1 million mansion walking around when you're listening to Rick Ross too. It doesn't make it true, but you can feel like it, sure. And so if that's what it does for you, then that's what it does for you. But I think it is, kind of weird. It is that open, ironic joke that I know that people can't relate to this, but yet they are buying it up and eating it up as if they could. And I know when I'm talking about this stuff, about my private jet and how many bags I'm packing to go on this trip, or how many girls I got going with me, or what this woman gonna do for me because I just said you gonna do this for me because she, I'm a rich guy and she gonna do that. Like these are things so many people can't relate to, but maybe they want to relate to. Maybe they want to see it. Maybe they want that to feel it. Maybe they just want to feel it. And I think he provides that outlet for that. And I think it's a lot to be said on, is that healthy? Is that wanting of that outlet healthy? And that's a kind of a sociological thing. That's probably a different topic for a different day. But in order to just coming back to him, it is a weird open joke that that people really can't relate to it, but yet they love it. And I think a valid criticism that I have consistently had of Drake is that I believe he's too old to act the way that he does a lot of times. Whether that is the pettiness of arguing with people or taking shots at people about stuff. Sometimes I'm just like, what are we talking about? Or, like, even in his music, he talks about, the girls he dated being 22, 23, 24, 25. I don't believe Drake's a pedophile, but I mean, he could be prone to that the same as most other private artists could be, I suppose. But I think the criticism of him acting too old for his age is valid. It's very valid. It's beyond valid, quite frankly. It is very evident. Um, because I think that there is one element to Drake music that lacks. It's the fact that it does not have a lot of personal growth to it over time. Like if you track his career over time, a lot of his music now sounds the same. It doesn't sound the same per se, but his versions of growth is not really growth. It's just a change in his attitude. And I think that is kind of I think that's I don't I mean I think that's kind of weird, but at the same time, often the reprieve that I've given him is that I can't expect growth out of you that you don't have. And if that is the growth that you've experienced in life, then and you portray that in your music, then you've portrayed growth in your music that is authentic and relatable to you and what you've done. And I can't expect anything outside of that. I can't expect you to be somebody that you're not. I can't expect you to do what I think you should do for your age if that's not what you think you should do for your age. You know what I mean? And so that's kind of where I come from. Like my thought on that is that I do think he's too old. But one, does it matter? No, because his music still sells and people buy it regardless. Do I think that Father Time, when Father Time catches up to Drake, is gonna have an issue? Maybe he may just be like his dad. His dad acts like his dad seems like one of them guys that's in kind of like a time loop himself, and maybe he'll just be like that. Like I don't know, but I think it is a valid criticism, but I also think of whether he's shown personal growth, but I also think if he may have shown his personal growth may look differently than what we just expect it to be. And if that's the case and he's shown that, then I can't ask him to do something he's not because that's inauthentic to him. Um, I also think, concern I have is that, just the same as for any artist, and he's not the number one artist that this has happened to, but musically his style has been over replicated and over copied. The rap singing, I think even just the way that he rhymes at times has been overly replicated by people. Um, Not as bad as other artists. Quite frankly, I think Future has been the most overly replicated artist maybe of our generation, hip hop wise. I don't remember music. I don't say I don't remember music. Music sounded a lot different before Future came out, before he got popular. After he got popular, everybody was doing that. Like, and I think Ja Rule walked so Future could run, but like everybody was doing like the Future brand of music. No, I say Ja Rule walked, so probably T Pain could jog and Future could run. And I just think but Drake, in a sense, is almost like Future in that rapping R&B sense. But I think his avenue provided a lot of other artists a chance to kind of sound like him, to do those similar things, and imitation is a great form of flattery. Like people are going, if they see you as successful, they're going to try to emulate that. So I get it. It's just it is kind of uh, overdone at times by a lot of different artists. And to speak on the kind of the musical business side of it to a degree, concerns you have with Drake is a lot in that regard. I mean, because he's had a controversial history of stealing songs. He's had a controversial history of having ghostwriters. You can think of songs like "Closer Than My Dreams" or something like that, where you could find who the original artist was and be like, He didn't steal that song, but see, like essentially you took somebody else's song and made it your own. And I don't really The ghostwriter thing I don't really pay a lot of attention to because I think most rappers have ghostwriters. It's just the concept of being honest about it. I think is the issue. But most rappers have ghostwriters, and most ones that say they don't have ghostwriters, and you can hear it a lot of times. And I don't think Drake he writes a lot of his own music. You can hear it in terms of just the verses and the lyrics that come out are very personal to him. But I don't think any artist, especially that's making the amount of music that they're making, that you make when you're at that top level, could really be out there and not be having, ghostwriters or some sort of support or assistance at some point. But I also think that you have to give, your ghostwriters their just due and credit. You have to give, the people that you take these songs from their just due and credit. And I don't, and they're just due their credit and their fair compensation. And I don't feel like at times, and I think that's been the argument against him, is that at times he has not. And again, is I'm not, I can't argue that on him more than other artists, but it does not um, escape him from that accountability of being better, a better business person in that regard either. And I think that is where he has been kind of shisty on some people, but I mean that's been the case, and also with the shelving artist thing, like the I Love McConan guy, what was it, Block Boy JB? Like he has a good, well, he didn't shelve Block Boy JB. That was more of hopping on a lesser known artist song, and then it becomes so famous because people think it's yours. Four Bats, same way. I Love McConan, even though he signed him and kind of shelled him after, same way. And like you can't. Not even Weekend kind of. I don't know if the Weekend felt like he was shelved, but like his Beyond Party Next Door, frankly, his because I don't know, I don't remember if Division is OVO or not, but Beyond Party Next Door, his pushing of artists has been minimal, even the artists that he signs. But that's most rappers. I feel like Lil Wayne might be one of the best ones to be like, I can say I put out three major artists in Tyga, Nicki Minaj, and Drake, but most artists don't have put out a lot. Like they bring a lot of artists up under them in their umbrella, but they don't really push them that hard. And it could be 1,000 reasons for that. And but I don't think Drake is any different. And while I do think that it's a music business wise, again, you can't kind of escape him from the accountability of being better. At the same time, I can't blame him. I can't say he's different, or I can't key in on him more than I could key in on anybody else. But he does need to be better. And I think, as, and I think it is a testament. I think a lot of artists get shady in the music business because it lends itself to that. And I think if he wants to, one reason why a lot of people don't, I mean, some people don't like him and they tend to have a lot of issues with him is because of that. And if he wants to change that, then that's that perception, and that's one of the things he can do to change it. Um, and and to that point where I was just saying, there's a lot of hate, whether it's justified or unjustified towards him. Like the Kendrick Lamar to Not Like Us, like where all the artists were getting together and high fiving each other, like, hey, we finally ended Drake, it finally happened. Like I think that was kind of lame as shit, but at the same time, I understood why a lot of those rappers had legitimate gripes or legitimate grievances with him. And I think you can't have all these fires and battles and expect people to and expect everybody to not celebrate your demise when so many people feel like they have an issue with your success because it came at a factor that hurt them or something like that nature. And so I get it, like it's a little weird, but I get it. But I think at the same time, I don't like. I also think sometimes Drake's response of just, "Oh, they're all jealous because they're not me," is a little bit ingenuine. But at the same time, it probably does have an element of truth to it too, because he is more commercially successful than them. While even like I can understand somebody being upset where you're like, "Hey, fuck you! I can diss you or do whatever I want and then still sell as much as I want to sell." I can understand, like you know what I mean. Like I get it from both sides. Um, so to kind of conclude, like I think Drake has changed not only rap but music forever. Um, and both with his music as, standing alone, and then his brand, his aura, his style. I think that is both had a lasting impact on music for better or for worse. And I think, he can be obviously cringy and corny and petty and emotional and other things, but it's it's odd because somehow that works for him. Like that literally that all of that works for his brand, and it works for what sells for him. And it's just something that you normally don't see outside of like Eminem, maybe, when he was, coming up being like corny and weird, and just openly doing that. Like, it's something you just normally don't see. And, I think, like, despite his shortcomings and like his many rivalries, he stays as a consistent hit maker and a consistent mainstay in rap. And I think that is a testament to who he is as an artist, and a testament to his work. I mean, his work effort, his work ethic. Sorry, that you just normally wouldn't see too many people be able to be successful, regardless of like all it would seem like, the various issues and fires that you have going on. And I think that's part of why people don't like. I mean, he has so many rivalries, is that people feel like regardless of what he does, he's fine. And I mean, I do agree with that to a degree. I feel like Drake has like the Pootie Tang type of effect to him, to where like I think he's a great artist, and I think he makes great music at times. But I do feel like at the same time he could get on a track and just yell blankly, and most likely people would eat that up as well, because he's just a major artist. And so I understand why some people be like, "Oh, he just mainstream and just and bots and blah blah blah." But like, I do think that, when you look at kind of the impact, and when you look at just the relation of what people are listening to, actually, listening to, oftentimes it's him. A lot of times they're listening to him and they don't even realize it. You know what I mean? Um, Most of the time you go to a party, you go to a club, they're playing Drake at some point. Multiple Drake songs. He's on ESPN, he's on WWE, he's on this, he's on that. Like, I mean, in terms of his music being played, like, and you can't deny that. And I mean, I think, just to the last point, whether you think he's a colonizer or rap, or you think he's the GOAT, or what, anywhere in between, he is firmly planting himself as a mainstay of music and a face of hip hop. And that's not going to change. And I don't think he's going anywhere. I think the only thing that Drake has to worry about, quite frankly, is Father Time and how that impacts him. And that is something, that we will see whenever whenever that we get to that bridge. But it'll definitely be interesting to look at. So thank you all, for tuning in to this week's episode. Again, this is the Maybe I'm Just Not Getting It podcast. I'm your host, Robert Davis. Again, follow me, Instagram, RTD_III, Facebook, Robert Trey Davis III. Again, the podcast, follow, comment, like, subscribe, all that good stuff on Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio, Spotify, and YouTube. Same name, Maybe I'm Just Not Getting It podcast. Appreciate all your feedback. Appreciate everything that y'all are, all the engagement y'all are giving. And I'll see y'all on next week's episode. All right, peace.